My granddaughter blocked me on her wedding day. Felicity Whitaker, once my pride, now my problem, erased me from her guest list. The flowers were flown in, the champagne chilled, the arch dripping in orchids. By the next afternoon, the venue she'd booked was mine. Deed signed, keys in hand. Her wedding contract? Cancelled under owner's discretion. She blocked me from her aisle. I blocked her from my legacy. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The fountain pen felt heavier than usual in Marlene's hand as she bent over the kitchen table. She signed her name at the bottom of the ivory card, looping the final ed with practiced care. Her script still carried that 1950s schoolhouse discipline, neat, measured, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The card was simple: for your wedding day with love and pride. No unnecessary flourishes. She had rewritten it 3 times that morning until it struck the right balance. Warm without presuming she knew the couple better than they knew themselves. Beside the card lay a small velvet pouch. She eased it open, and for a moment the morning sunlight caught the sapphires, in a scatter of deep blue sparks. Her mother's brooch, worn on her own wedding day, then her daughter's. The metal was cool against her palm, faintly smelling of cedar from decades in the old jewelry box. It wasn't an accessory, it was a fragment of the Whitaker lineage. Sliding it inside the envelope felt like tucking away something irreplaceable, a small inheritance of meaning. She sealed the flap, pressing her thumb along the edge, and set it on the table, ready to be slipped into the wedding gift box once her invitation arrived. She crossed to the front hall, retrieving the day's mail from the lacquered oak stand. A stack of envelopes, fanned in her hand: utility bill, charity flyer, pre-approved credit offer, glossy coupon booklet. Not one had that distinct weight of formal stationery, that faint scent of pressed paper and ink she remembered from Felicity's college graduation. She stood still for a moment, the ticking wall clock growing louder in the hush. Then she opened her laptop. The inbox held nothing new but spam, receipts, and a gentle reminder from her bank about security settings. No save the date, no RSVP link. Her hand went to her phone. Felicity's number was still saved under Darling Girl, a relic from the years when she'd stayed over on weekends, baking cookies in Marlene's kitchen. The call didn't even ring once before the screen flashed. Call failed. Frowning, she tried again. Same result. Something in her chest cooled. She opened her contacts, tapped Felicity's profile photo, the one with her standing on a rooftop in New York, champagne in hand. Instead of a feed, she got a blank page. User not found. The chill in her chest shifted to something sharper. Without pausing, she dialed her son. He picked up after the 3rd ring, his tone deliberately casual. "Hey Mom, what's up? Have you heard from Felicity?" "I've been trying to, Mom," he cut in, voice flattening. "Let it go, it's her day." "That's not the point," she said evenly. "It's complicated. Okay. Just don't make a thing out of it." "I wasn't making a thing," she replied. "Until you told me not to." A pause. She heard him exhale through his nose, then a muttered, "I'm late for a meeting," before the line went dead. She stood in the foyer a long while after, listening to the silence settle back in. Outside, a blue jay landed on the wrought iron railing, its head cocked as if it had caught the change in the air. Hours later, after dinner, she was folding linens in the den when her phone chimed, a notification from a local events account she followed. She nearly ignored it, until the thumbnail showed a glimmer of string lights. The clip began with champagne glasses clinking in slow motion, the sound of soft jazz in the background. The camera panned across a long table dressed in orchids and crystal. Laughter bubbled, silver cutlery glinted. The caption from it: Camille Reed Events Rid. Tomorrow's rehearsal dinner is one for the books. True family only. Legacy is earned, not inherited. Marlene's eyes narrowed. She replayed the video, pausing on familiar faces: her sister's son, an old neighbor, Felicity's college roommate. None strangers. And there, at the head of the table, Felicity herself, leaning toward a man's whispered joke, her hair in a sleek low bun Marlene had never seen her wear. The orchids seemed to breathe in the candlelight. She could almost smell their faint vanilla sweetness, hear the warm murmur of voices that excluded her completely. Her gaze caught on the background, a carved stone archway, weathered and crowned with ivy. She knew that arch. Willowmere Estate. Marlene sat at her writing desk, the morning light spilling across the polished cherrywood, and stared at the paused video of the rehearsal dinner on her phone. The carved arch of Willowmere seemed to mock her, not just for its beauty, but for the fact she had seen it in countless charity galas she had discreetly funded over the years. Her fingers closed around the phone, and before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed Ellie Frost. "I need you to find out," Marlene said without preamble. "Felicity used any family trust money for this wedding." Ellie's voice carried its usual dry amusement. "I take it this is not a congratulatory call. Humor me." By noon, Ellie called back, the clink of ice in her glass faint over the line. She didn't touch the primary account, but she quietly dipped into a maintenance fund you set up for the carriage house roof 10 years ago. About 42,000. Not exactly shingles and gutters. Marlene's jaw tightened. "She thinks because I don't mention a fund, I've forgotten it exists. That's the trouble with assuming silence is ignorance," Ellie replied. Before the day was out, Lucas's name lit up Marlene's phone. "You're going to want to hear this," he said in his measured way. The venue booking was made under D&M Lifestyle Holdings. Derek and Malone. Your future grandson-in-law. LLC registered 6 months ago. No assets, no tax filings. Smells like a front. The word front echoed in her mind as she closed her laptop. If they thought a paper company could shield their dealings, they hadn't yet learned what a Whitaker could do with a paper trail. 2 days later, Marlene walked up the gravel drive of Willowmere Estate, her steps slow but certain. The Virginia sun slanted across the manicured lawns, gilding the hydrangeas and roses that spilled over their borders. She wore a pale blue dress, and her gentlest smile, the kind that made strangers underestimate her. Jane Holloway, the estate's owner, greeted her at the front steps. "Mrs. Whitaker, isn't it? You're here for the tour?" "Yes," Marlene said, adjusting the strap of her handbag. "My granddaughter's thinking of getting married next year. I thought I'd see it for myself." Inside, the air was cool and faintly scented with polished wood and lavender. Sunlight poured through tall windows onto honey-colored floors. Jane led her past the ballroom, its chandeliers winking above a polished dance floor, then down to the west lawn, and there it was. The floral arch from the video, real and resplendent, draped in cascading white orchids. A custom sign leaned against a nearby table, "Felicity and Derek Forever" in looping gold script. Marlene paused in front of it, her eyes tracing each letter like a map. Jane followed her gaze, smiling. "The Whitakers must be thrilled to host such an event here. It's one of our most elaborate bookings this season." Marlene let the silence stretch a heartbeat too long. "Yes," she said finally, her voice even. "We are quite thorough about choosing our settings." Jane beamed, oblivious. "We're lucky to have them." The deposit came in promptly. "Their planner has been very particular. Orchids flown in from Hawaii, imported linens, no expense spared." Marlene walked slowly around the arch, fingertips grazing the petals. Somewhere nearby, the fountain burbled, mingling with the faint scent of gardenia. She imagined the aisle they had planned, the photos, the applause, the curated illusion of family unity. She stopped in front of Jane, that same gentle smile curling at the corner of her mouth. "Tell me, Jane." She adjusted her handbag strap, eyes meeting the other woman's. "Is Willowmere for sale?" Jane's smile lingered, but her eyes shifted. A flicker of calculation Marlene had seen in real estate negotiations before. The polite tour guide tone softened. "Well, Willowmere is privately owned. My late husband and I bought it 20 years ago, but the upkeep is a beast. Truth is, my co-owners are eager to step away. We've kept the potential sale quiet, don't want the wrong sort of buyers sniffing around." Marlene tilted her head, as though she were only mildly curious. "And what sort would be wrong?" Oh, developers, Jane said, lowering her voice. People who'd carve it up into townhomes. This place deserves better. The fountain splash carried across the lawn, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and roses. Marlene looked past Jane toward the great arched entryway, imagining its silence under private control. And if the right buyer came along? Jane gave the smallest shrug. We'd listen. By the time Marlene was back in her colonial-style study that afternoon, she had already texted Ellie, "Call me. This is urgent." Ellie answered on the second ring, voice brisk. "What did you find?" "I found an exit door," Marlene said. "And I plan to walk through it before anyone knows it's open. Set up an offer through MW Heritage LLC." Ellie didn't need reminding. MW Heritage was the quiet shell Marlene used for historical preservation buys. Terms? Cash. No contingencies. And make it clear that discretion isn't optional. The offer went out before dusk. By mid-morning the next day, Jane's lawyer had called. They wanted a meeting. The Willowmere library smelled faintly of leather and lemon polish when Marlene sat down at the long table with Jane and her counsel. Papers slid across the gleaming surface. Jane's voice held both relief and disbelief. 48 hours, Mrs. Whitaker. I've never seen a deal move this quickly. I've never liked wasting time, Marlene replied, signing each page without hesitation. At precisely 3:42 p.m., MW Heritage LLC became the legal owner of Willowmere Estate. The ink was still drying when the keys, weighty brass things, landed in her palm. The metal was cold, but in her mind it already burned with purpose. Back in her car, Marlene called Ellie again. "Now about that wedding contract Camille signed." Ellie rustled papers on her end. "Ah yes, standard event lease." However, her tone sharpened like a scalpel hitting bone. "There's an owner discretion clause. Allows you to terminate without penalty if the event compromises the estate's heritage integrity." Heritage integrity, Marlene repeated, tasting the words. "That's about to be my favorite phrase." "I'll draft the notice tonight," Ellie said. At home, the late summer air drifted through open French doors, carrying the faint hum of cicadas. Marlene poured herself a glass of chilled Chardonnay and dialed Lucas. "I don't need an audience," she told him. "I need precision. This has to be clean. No room for them to paint me as vindictive." Lucas's reply was steady. "Understood. You want this to look inevitable, not personal." "Exactly." The next afternoon, as if on cue, Camille Reed posted her final pre-wedding sweeping drone footage over Willowmere's lawn, clips of the floral arch bathed in golden hour light, champagne towers being assembled by staff in white gloves. Her caption dripped with confidence, "Next weekend flawless." Marlene watched the video twice, noting every unnecessary flourish, the smug overuse of the estate's name, the hint of exclusion in her tone. She closed the app, picked up her phone, and hit send on the email Ellie had drafted. The subject line was simple. Event contract termination. Immediate. The body was even simpler. Per owner discretion clause, your booking has been cancelled. Do not proceed with setup. Somewhere across town, Camille Reed's perfect weekend just shattered. The morning after the termination email went out, the phone lines at Willowmere lit up like an ambulance bay. Camille Reed's name flashed first. Jane Holloway, still technically on staff to ease the transition, answered with the same measured warmth she'd used with brides for 20 years. "I'm afraid you'll need to speak with the new owner," Jane said, her voice as calm as a pond at dawn. There was a beat of silence, then Camille's clipped tone, "New owner?" "Yes," Jane replied. "Mrs. Marlene Whitaker. I'll patch you through." Marlene's study smelled faintly of bergamot tea as she picked up the receiver. "Good morning, Miss Reed. What game are you playing?" Camille's voice was already frayed. "No game," Marlene said evenly. "Just housekeeping. Your event is no longer welcome at Willowmere. You can't just," but Marlene had already hung up. By noon the calls started coming in from the vendors, not yet aware that the woman answering was the one holding the deed. "Hi. I'm just confirming delivery of the 7-tier cake for the Whitaker Malone wedding," chirped a voice from a bakery in Richmond. Marlene's reply was polite, Clipped, final. Please remove Felicity Whitaker from your schedule. You will not be delivering to Wilmere. A pause. Then a confused, "Oh, all right, ma'am." Half an hour later, the florist rang. Then the photographer. Each call ended the same way. A calm instruction, no hint of apology. The message spread quietly, like smoke curling under a door. Camille's second call came mid-afternoon, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "If you think this will stand, you're out of your mind. I'll see you in court." Within minutes, Ellie had forwarded a PDF scanned in crisp black and white. Across the top, in bold, "Owner, Marlene Whitaker." The signature line bore yesterday's date. "Send her that," Marlene told Ellie. "Let her take it up with reality." The first domino fell that evening. The florist, after receiving Ellie's confirmation, sent a brief email: "We must regretfully withdraw from this event due to contractual risk." The photographer followed within an hour. The next morning, the cake vendor, a man with a reputation for drama, posted a cryptic update to his business page: "Not getting sued for floral trespass." By now the story was moving through Charlottesville's event circuit like a current, whispered over brunch tables, murmured between hair appointments. And then came Derek's move. A new Instagram story, posted from what looked like a downtown rooftop bar. Felicity's laugh could be heard faintly in the background, but the camera was fixed on Derek's face, angled to catch the skyline behind him. Caption: "Old money, new legacy." The words were a dare. Marlene watched it once, twice, the city lights blinking behind him. She could almost smell the faint trace of his cologne in that smug tone, the kind of scent that lingers just a little too long in an elevator. She did not reply online. She did not call her son. She did not allow the blood to rise in her cheeks. Instead, she opened her laptop and composed a single-line email to Felicity's personal address, the one she had not used in almost a year. Subject: Willowmere Body. "Let me reintroduce myself." She read it once, then hit send. Somewhere across town, a notification would light up Felicity's phone, the same phone that had long ago blocked her grandmother's number. But email, Marlene thought, was harder to erase. The day after her email to Felicity, Marlene sat at her dining room table, a legal pad open beside her tea. The china cup trembled faintly in its saucer, not from nerves but from the steady, contained energy she'd been holding since that first blocked call. Ellie called at 9:15 sharp. "We can either keep this quiet," she said, "or we can make it official." Marlene didn't hesitate. "Official. I want the record clear before they rewrite it in their favor." By noon, Ellie had sent a press release to every media contact she'd ever worked with. Effective immediately, the wedding of Felicity Whitaker and Derek Malone, previously scheduled at Willowmere Estate, is canceled due to unauthorized use of family trust funds. The matter is under review by the Whitaker estate attorney. No commentary, no embellishment, just the kind of precision that made it impossible to refute. The first call came from the Charlottesville Herald. By the next morning, their society page carried a headline that rippled through every porch, breakfast table, and coffee shop in town: "Whitaker wedding canceled by family matriarch." Underneath, a black and white photo of Marlene at last year's historical preservation gala, calm, dignified, smiling faintly as if the world outside the frame didn't concern her. The story was brief but brutal, a matter of financial impropriety, a canceled event, the estate owner declining to comment further. The absence of Felicity's voice in the piece was louder than anything she could have said. By mid-afternoon, Felicity's once carefully curated Instagram grid became a war zone. Hundreds of comments bloomed under her last bridal sponsorship post: "Guess grandma's money does matter. So much for self-made. Is Derek going to put this on his LinkedIn?" Her engagement rate, once the pride of her pitch deck, began to crater. Quietly, brand managers pulled out. An activewear label removed her from their ambassador page. A skincare line archived all posts featuring her face. Camille, ever the self-appointed image strategist, tried to claw the narrative back. She posted a soft focus video of Felicity sipping tea, captioned, "Sometimes love stories are tested by forces we can't control. Wishing peace to all involved." It was followed by an interview snippet with a local podcaster, where she implied a degree of elder confusion may have played a role in the cancellation. Ellie responded within the hour, not on social media, but with a notarized, time-stamped lawyer PDF delivered to committee. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every contract clause was itemized in chronological order. The subject line was simply, to clarify. On Thursday, just after dusk, Derek Malone arrived at Marlene's front gate in a navy suit, his tie still knotted from what had likely been an after-work strategy session. From the front window, Marlene saw him press the intercom. His voice carried clearly through the speaker. "Marlene, we should talk. I'm sure we can find a way forward without all this." She didn't move from her chair. She let the cicadas fill the silence between his pauses, until finally, after a long sigh, he turned and walked back to his car. It was almost 11 months to the day since Felicity had last called her grandmother, when the phone rang that Friday afternoon. Marlene recognized the number instantly. Her voice when she answered was calm. "Hello, Felicity. You've humiliated me," Felicity said, her tone jagged. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? To my career?" Marlene let the words hang, hearing the shallow breath on the other end, the slight tremor underneath the anger. "That wasn't humiliation," she said finally, her voice as even as a level beam. "That was an introduction." The fallout was no longer just about a canceled wedding. Felicity was now publicly exposed, stripped of her financial safety net, and forced to explain how she had lost a fully funded dream, all because she had tried to erase the very woman who had made it possible. The next move would not be Felicity's to make. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Marlene was watching drops streak down the window panes, the scent of percolating coffee filling the kitchen, when the boutique's number flashed on her phone. "Mrs. Whitaker?" The voice was bright but uncertain. "We're confirming final alterations for Miss Felicity Whitaker's gown this Friday. We just wanted to double-check the billing under the Whitaker Family Trust." Marlene straightened in her chair. "Repeat that." "Yes, ma'am. The payment information we have on file is from the estate account. It's the same account we've been charging for fittings. That account," Marlene said, her tone sharpening like a knife's edge, "is for family estate maintenance, not wardrobes." A small pause. "I see. Shall I cancel the payment?" Marlene said. "This bride is no longer authorized under our family estate." By Friday afternoon, the rain had given way to humid sunlight, and the boutique's display windows gleamed with ivory lace and tulle. Inside, the air smelled faintly of steamed fabric and gardenia-scented candles. Felicity arrived right on schedule, heels clicking against the marble floor, oversized sunglasses framing a face set in cool detachment. Camille trailed behind her, phone in hand, filming for what was clearly intended to be a triumphant final fitting post. A seamstress approached with a tentative smile. "Miss Whitaker, there's been a change with your payment arrangement." "What kind of change?" Felicity's voice was already cutting. "The authorization from your family trust was rescinded," the seamstress said gently. "We'll need another form of payment before we can continue." Camille lowered her phone, her expression tightening. "That's not possible. This is already, I'll pay after the wedding." Felicity interrupted, waving a manicured hand. "Just finish the alterations." "I'm sorry," the seamstress replied, "but our policy requires clearance before." The rest of her words were drowned out by Felicity's raised voice. "This is ridiculous. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know what kind of exposure you're about to lose?" Heads turned from other fitting rooms. The air thickened with tension, the soft strains of the boutique's piano playlist suddenly too delicate for the volume in the room. Someone's phone caught the whole scene. Felicity pacing in her gown, hands gesturing sharply, Camille whispering in her ear, a staffer in the background folding her arms in quiet refusal. By nightfall, the footage had made its way to Charlottesville Chatter, the local gossip page. The caption read, "Bridilla shuts down boutique after surprise cancellation." Comments exploded. Some defended her. Most didn't. The next morning, Camille tried to counterpunch on Instagram. A photo of a lace sleeve, her caption dripping with insinuation. Some people die bitter, some just try to kill joy. Marlene didn't bother responding online. She knew better than to fight in public when the real blows could be landed in private. 2 days later, Lucas called with something new. "You need to hear this." Static, then Derek's voice, low, irritated. "She's senile. Lucas, this'll blow over. Camille's talking to some people. We'll figure out a way to get back in there." Lucas's voice was calm. "She's not senile, Derek. She's meticulous." The recording clicked off. Marlene listened twice, the tone of Derek's voice lingering like a bad aftertaste. Then she called Ellie. "File it," Marlene said. "Both of them. Formal cease and desist. Fraudulent use of trust funds, misrepresentation, anything that applies. I want their names on the record for exactly what they've done." Ellie's reply was dry, almost amused. "Consider it done. And I'll make sure they receive it by courier, right at dinner time." The next morning, Marlene sat in the private meeting room at Jefferson First Bank. The space was lined with oil paintings of old Virginia estates, the air carrying the faint scent of leather and polished brass. Across from her sat Nathan Price, her financial manager of 15 years, a man who never wasted her time with small talk when the look in her eyes said business. "I want every family disbursement frozen," Marlene said, setting her handbag on the table. "Immediate effect. No exceptions." Nathan nodded, flipping open a leather-bound ledger. "We can lock down the primary trust within the hour, but I'd also suggest an identity verification layer. Any request must be confirmed by you in person, with 2 witnesses." "Do it," she replied. "If they want money, they can bring me a notarized reason, and I won't be signing." 2 hours later, Ellie's call came in, the faint sound of paper rustling in the background. "It's done. Felicity's access to all family accounts is revoked, permanently. Even if she cries to your son, the paperwork is ironclad." Marlene allowed herself the smallest breath of satisfaction. "Good. That should stop the bleeding." "Well," Ellie said, her voice dry as a winter branch, "it'll stop her bleeding. You, however, might want to brace for some noise." That noise came sooner than expected. Mid-afternoon, Marlene logged into the estate's online portal and scrolled to a secondary account, one labeled Educational Enrichment, a modest fund originally meant to cover advanced courses or travel for younger family members. The balance was untouched until last week, when someone had scheduled a transfer to an offshore travel service. She canceled the payment with a single click, watching the confirmation notice appear like a closed door. Felicity's honeymoon fund had just evaporated before it was even real. 2 days later, in a boutique on Main Street, Felicity's card was declined in front of 3 of her friends. The clerk's polite voice, "I'm sorry, it's not going through," was captured by a bystander's phone, followed by Felicity's sharp, "Run it again," and then a visible flush rising in her cheeks when the second attempt failed. She left without buying anything, the glass door swinging shut hard enough to rattle the bell overhead. Meanwhile, Derek had begun circulating quiet requests to his friends. Short-term loan, he'd say over beers or in hushed calls. "We just need to cover some deposits until all this blows over." But the way his contacts retold it, there was no confidence in his voice. Only the sharp edge of someone realizing the cavalry wasn't coming. By week's end, Marlene added a final layer of insulation. At the gated entrance to her neighborhood, she handed the security guard a typed list. The heading was simple: visitor restrictions. "No one by the name Whitaker under 30 is to be admitted without my direct clearance," she said. The guard glanced at the paper, then back at her. "Even family." "Especially family," she replied, tucking the list back into the clipboard. That evening, the sun had just dipped low enough to bathe her living room in amber light when her phone's voicemail icon lit up. She pressed play. It was her daughter-in-law's voice, soft, coaxing, with a tremor just under the surface. "She's crying, Marlene. Can't you just fix this quietly? For the family's sake." Marlene stood by the window, watching the slow sway of the magnolia branches outside. She let the message finish, then pressed the phone flat against her palm, as if weighing whether it deserved an answer at all. The day after her daughter-in-law's voicemail, Marlene sat in her study with a blank Word document open. The cursor blinked at her like a dare. She began to type. Clear, measured sentences, outlining the facts, the misuse of trust funds, the unauthorized withdrawal, the breach of contract at Willowmere. When she reached the last line, her hand hovered over the post button. The statement was ready for the world, but the world didn't need to hear it from her lips. She closed the laptop without saving and slid the machine back into its leather sleeve. Let them wonder. Let them fill in the blanks. Ellie, however, moved with precision. That afternoon, every family trustee received a single-page PDF in their inbox. The subject line was blunt. Before you ask. The file held dates, dollar amounts, and contract copies in neat chronological order. No speculation, no adjectives, just enough truth to make gossip irrelevant. By evening, 3 trustees had replied with the same 2 words, understood completely. The ripple effects traveled quickly outside the family. Camille Reed's glossy reputation took its first public hit when 2 vendors citing contract ethics canceled future bookings with her agency. One of them, the florist who'd walked away from Felicity's wedding, posted a short statement about valuing integrity over revenue. It wasn't tagged, but everyone knew exactly which event they meant. At the same time, Derek's world began to contract. An anonymous complaint landed on his firm's desk, alleging misuse of joint business funds for personal expenses. The firm launched an internal review, and his once confident stride into the office now carried the hesitance of someone unsure how long the welcome would last. Late one Thursday evening, the Whitaker family group chat lit up with a message from Felicity. It was a single sentence: she was never there for me. No names, no context, but the implication was obvious. For a few minutes the thread stayed quiet. Then Lucas broke it with a photo pulled from a decades-old album. Felicity, no more than 3 years old, asleep in Marlene's lap on a porch swing. His caption was just as sharp as it was simple. Was this not there enough? The typing bubble appeared, then vanished. Felicity said nothing more. Marlene read the exchange from her armchair, a soft afghan across her knees. Outside, the crickets sang in the warm Virginia dark. She didn't join the conversation. She didn't need to. The truth had its own gravity now, pulling people into place without her saying a word. The next morning, she opened her front door to retrieve the paper and nearly missed it, an envelope resting squarely in the middle of the welcome mat. Cream stock, no return address, her name written in a slanted, impatient hand. She bent down, the faint scent of cologne still clinging to the paper. Derek's handwriting. She held it for a moment, weighing the choice: open it now or let it sit like a stone on the edge of her day. In the end, she didn't break the seal. Not yet. The envelope sat on her desk all morning, the pale cream catching the light from the east window. Marlene had almost forgotten it was there. Almost, until she sat down with her second cup of tea, and the faint trace of Derek's cologne reached her again. She slit the flap cleanly with a silver letter opener, the blade whispering against paper. Inside, the handwriting was as self-conscious as the man himself. Neat to studied, a performance in ink. Marlene, I think we can both agree that what's happened has been unfortunate. We know you're lonely. This hurt you too. I don't think anyone wants to see the family dragged through more public drama. If you're willing to make things right financially, even privately, we can avoid a less pleasant outcome. Camille and I are prepared to reconsider certain legal avenues if you can meet us halfway. Let's talk like reasonable adults. Derek, the gall of it, emotional blackmail disguised as an olive branch, made her laugh once sharply, before she reached for her phone. Ellie answered on the first ring. Tell me you opened it. I did, Marlene said, her voice as smooth as the tea in her hand. You'll enjoy this. She read the letter aloud. Ellie snorted so hard it distorted the line. Is he seriously threatening emotional blackmail via Hallmark stationery? The man should be embarrassed. He isn't, Marlene said. But he will be. An hour later she was at her bank. The marble lobby smelled faintly of polished stone and lilies from the arrangement on the concierge desk. Nathan Price met her in his usual crisp suit, I want to make a donation, she said, sliding a check request across the desk. 25,000, payable to the Charlottesville Women's Shelter. Nathan nodded. Anonymous? Absolutely not. In Felicity Whitaker's name. Make sure the press release is airtight. By midweek, the Herald ran a story above the fold. Family matriarch gives back after wedding funds misused. The accompanying photo was one from last winter. Marlene standing beside a food drive table, her coat buttoned against the wind. The article detailed the donation and its purpose without a single defensive quote from her. Social media lit up again, but this time the comments skewed in her favor. Classy move. That's how you handle it. Petty and philanthropic. My new goals. The letter, however, had done more than fail. It had triggered the next misstep. Within days, Felicity's name appeared on the county court docket. She'd filed for a temporary restraining order against Marlene, citing harassment and undue public humiliation. Marlene didn't even have to appear. The judge denied it on the grounds of insufficient evidence. Ellie texted her the decision with a single word: predictable. The quiet after the denial lasted only a weekend. Monday morning, Ellie called again, her tone edged with both amusement and anticipation. We've just been served. For what this time? Marlene asked, setting her tea down with deliberate care. Defamation and emotional damages. Ellie said, filed jointly by Felicity and Derek. They've gone public. Marlene leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking softly. They're walking straight into the net. Exactly, Ellie replied. Every bank record, every contract, every termination notice you've kept. That's our case. They think they're cornering you. We're going to close the door instead. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and coffee, a mix of old wood and early nerves. Marlene stepped through the double doors in a pale gray suit, pearls at her ears, her hair pinned into its usual careful twist. She carried no folders, no tote bag, just her small clutch and the quiet gravity of someone who didn't need to prove she belonged there. The gallery was half full, curious locals, a few reporters, and two bloggers hoping for drama. Derek sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy suit that tried too hard, his cufflinks catching the light. Felicity sat beside him, her expression carefully arranged into the wounded composure she used for her followers. Ellie, seated next to Marlene at the defense table, slid a single binder in front of her. Every document in order, she murmured. Just let me do the talking. The judge called the room to order, and the plaintiff's attorney began with a syrupy statement about family ties and emotional harm. But when Ellie rose, her tone cut like clean glass. Your Honor, this case is not about hurt feelings. It is about financial misconduct, documented misconduct, and my client's lawful right to protect her assets and the property she now owns outright. She laid the first exhibit on the clerk's desk, bank statements with Felicity's name attached to withdrawals from the Trust Maintenance Fund. Next came the LLC registration for D&M Lifestyle Holdings, Derek's signature in black ink, then the terminated event contract, signed and dated, a clause highlighted in yellow, owner discretion. Under questioning, Felicity's polish began to chip. Miss Whitaker, who signed the booking agreement for Willowmere Estate. I don't remember, she said, her eyes darting toward Derek. Ellie stepped forward, holding up the page. Is this your signature? A long pause. It might be. And is this the same signature that authorized a $42,000 withdrawal from the family trust? Felicity's jaw tightened. I don't know. Then came the vendors. The florist, her voice steady, told the court, Mrs. Whitaker paid every invoice on time. When she canceled, she saved us from delivering arrangements for an event that no longer had a valid contract. She saved us from liability. The photographer echoed the sentiment. She didn't ruin anything. She prevented a breach. Each statement landed like another brick in the wall closing around Derek and Felicity's case. By midday, Derek's attorney was shifting uncomfortably, his questions shorter, his objections thinner. The judge leaned forward, expression unreadable, before delivering the first blow. On the matter of emotional damages, he said, the court finds the plaintiff's claims to be unsupported by the evidence. These are dismissed. A muffled gasp rippled through the gallery. Derek's jaw flexed. Felicity's gaze fixed on the tabletop. Ellie stood again, a quiet satisfaction in her movements. Your Honor, we now move for counterclaims, recovery of legal fees, damages for reputational harm, and reimbursement of all misused trust funds. The plaintiff's table went still. When court adjourned, the hallway outside filled with the rustle of papers, the buzz of reporters, and the echo of shoes on marble. Marlene walked through it without hurry, her clutch tucked neatly under her arm. She had made it clear she wasn't here for spectacle. Still, one reporter broke from the pack, microphone in hand. Mrs. Whitaker, any comment on today's dismissal? Marlene stopped. The faint scent of someone's cologne drifted past, the murmur of voices falling away. She looked directly into the lens, her voice steady, measured. The courthouse steps were warm under the late afternoon sun, the air heavy with the smell of exhaust from the idling news van. Marlene stood where the light caught her hair just so, the pale gray of her suit soft against the marble backdrop. The reporter's question still hung in the air. Any comment on today's dismissal? I didn't destroy a wedding, Marlene said, her tone as steady as the granite under her heels. I preserved a legacy. The click of camera shutters was like rainfall, relentless, overlapping, impossible to stop once it began. Someone shouted another question, but she was already walking toward the car. By morning, the quote had made the front page of the Charlottesville Herald. Not the society section. Page 1. The headline was simple. I preserved a legacy. Matriarch speaks after court victory. Within hours, the line trended on social media. It became a rallying cry, printed over stylized photos of Marlene in memes, hashtags, even a few Etsy mugs. The public shift was immediate and sharp. Camille's phone must have been buzzing nonstop. The backlash against her planning agency was swift. 2 high-profile clients pulled their contracts within 48 hours. A thread titled, "Would You Trust This Planner?" made its way across wedding forums, gathering hundreds of comments. She posted a tight-lipped "would wish them well" statement, but the damage was already done. Felicity's online world fared even worse. Brands quietly began scrubbing her from their feeds. A skincare line deleted every tagged photo. An athletic wear company replaced her sponsored post with a local yoga instructor. Her engagement rate, once a glossy selling point, slid into single digits. The once polished grid became a ghost town, comments replaced by question marks and sarcasm. Even Derek retreated. By the end of the week, every wedding-related photo was gone from his social media. The rooftop champagne toast, the rehearsal dinner reel, the slow-motion dance clip Camille had filmed, all replaced with vague motivational quotes and a headshot cropped too close. On Saturday, the air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle as Lucas joined Marlene on the porch. He carried a tray, tea for her, coffee for him, and set it on the wicker table between them. You were always the center of this family, he said, pouring without looking up. You just stopped saying it out loud. Marlene took her tea, the steam curling upward in the golden evening light. Sometimes you have to step back and see who fills the space you leave. And if they fill it badly, Lucas asked. Then she said, sipping, you take it back. The quiet hum of the porch fan filled the space between them. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked and the faint sound of children's laughter drifted from a backyard. For the first time in months, the world felt balanced again, hers to arrange, hers to protect. Just as the sun began to slip behind the trees, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Ellie stepped out, a thick envelope in her hand. She climbed the steps and placed it on the table, her expression wearing that particular mix of satisfaction and mischief Marlene had come to recognize. This, Ellie said, tapping the envelope, is going to make them choke. Marlene raised an eyebrow. Filed, approved, and now official, Ellie continued. MWW Heritage LLC owns the trademarks to Felicity and Derek. Name, style, and associated branding. All rights reserved. Ellie stayed standing as Marlene slid the envelope open. The paperwork inside was crisp, heavy stock. official enough to feel like a verdict. They tried to monetize the wedding, Ellie explained, taking a seat across from her. Felicity filed a Vanity LLC, Felicity and Derek, to create branded content, videos, posts, photo packages, but she never registered the intellectual property rights to the name or materials. And now? Marlene asked, scanning the embossed seal on the certificate. Now, Ellie said, you own it. Name, stylization, photos, captions, even the printed menus and signage they ordered. If they post anything using it, you can send a takedown notice. If they print it on a napkin, you can bill them. Marlene folded the papers neatly back into the envelope, her fingers steady. Then I suppose it's time to decide what to do with their brand. 3 days later, a plain white envelope arrived at the office of the Jefferson School of Journalism. Inside, a formal letter transferring all rights to the Felicity and Derek portfolio to the school as educational material for their ethics in media program. The dean called to confirm, "You understand we'll be dissecting this as a cautionary tale?" "I wouldn't have sent it otherwise," Marlene replied. While the journalism students queued up case notes, Camille was busy opening a very different letter, a notice of civil action filed against her personally for misrepresentation of funds and contractual fraud. Ellie delivered the update over lunch at a small French cafe. She'll try to fight it, but the vendor testimonies alone will bury her. At best, she'll settle. The clink of silverware against porcelain was the only sound Marlene made in reply. Sometimes victory didn't need commentary, it only needed momentum. That afternoon, she called her estate attorney to update her will. The mahogany-paneled conference room smelled faintly of tobacco and leather, a space built to make decisions stick. "Lucas will be executor," she said, her voice firm. "Effective immediately. Felicity is to be excluded from all personal and trust inheritances. I want it written plainly, no ambiguity." The pen scratched across paper. With every loop of ink, another door closed in the corridor Felicity had once assumed was hers to walk. 2 nights later, in the soft lamplight of her study, Marlene sat at her writing desk with a sheet of cream stationery. Her fountain pen moved without hurry, each stroke deliberate. "Colby, kindness earns legacy. No matter how loud the world gets, remember that. Love, Aunt Marlene." She slid the letter into an envelope, sealing it with a small wax stamp, and placed it in the outgoing tray. Colby was only 10, too young to understand all of this now, but someday he would. The days that followed were quiet, almost deceptively so. No more court appearances, no sudden calls from reporters. The story had shifted from scandal to parable, and public interest had already moved on to the next drama. Marlene watered her roses in the early morning light, took her walks along the shaded path by the river, and felt the air in her house grow still in a way it hadn't in months. It was just past sunset, when the quiet broke. A knock at the door, soft, hesitant. When Marlene opened it, the porch light spilled over a familiar face. Felicity stood there, hair loose, eyes rimmed in red. The gloss and polish were gone, replaced by something rawer. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice catching. For a moment, neither of them moved. The warm scent of honeysuckle drifted between them, the only sweetness in the heavy air. Marlene stepped aside without speaking, letting her granddaughter cross the threshold, but not yet deciding whether she would be welcomed in. The porch light cast Felicity in a pale halo, but up close her face told the truth. Mascara faintly smudged, the gloss on her lips worn away, a tremor in her hands that no filter could hide. Inside, Marlene led her to the sitting room. The air was scented faintly with sandalwood, from the candle burning on the mantel. They sat opposite each other, Felicity perching on the edge of the couch, Marlene in her armchair, her posture still and measured. "I was scared," Felicity began, her voice thin but urgent. "I wanted to be someone. I didn't know how." Marlene said nothing. Felicity's eyes searched hers for a crack of sympathy. "Derek's gone. We're not anything anymore. I'll go to therapy. I'll stop the posts. I need this to be over." Still Marlene didn't speak. I know I handled things wrong, Felicity said, her words gathering speed, as if momentum could save her. I can settle with you quietly. No more drama, no more lawyers. We can make it like it never happened. Marlene reached to the side table and picked up a plain manila envelope. She laid it on the low table between them and slid it forward with one finger. Inside was a single sheet, an itemized list of every dollar misused. Trust withdrawals, boutique payments, vendor deposits. Each line had a date, amount, and the fund it had come from. Felicity's hand trembled as she pulled the paper free. You may repay me, Marlene said evenly, or the women's shelter. But either way, you'll repay someone. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint tick of the mantel clock. Then Felicity's breath caught, sharp, wet. The tears came fast, her shoulders curling inward. I can't do this all at once, she whispered. That's fortunate, Marlene replied. I'm not asking you to. Felicity buried her face in her hands. The scent of her perfume, something floral and overly sweet, mingled with the sandalwood in the room, almost cloying now. I'm trying, she said, her voice muffled. You're performing, Marlene said, not unkindly. And performance is what got you here. The weight of the moment settled like dust on old furniture, quiet, inevitable. Marlene did not reach for her, did not soften her tone. She let Felicity sit in the space she had made for herself. After a long silence, Felicity rose. She folded the list and tucked it into her purse without meeting her grandmother's eyes. I'll be in touch, she murmured, and walked out into the night. Marlene watched from the doorway as her granddaughter's taillights disappeared down the street. The air outside was cool now, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. She closed the door without locking it, but also without leaving it open. The next morning, the house was bathed in pale gold light. Marlene stood at the kitchen counter, slipping her keys into her handbag. On the table sat a small stack of neatly tied envelopes, donations, bills, correspondence, waiting for the post. She picked up her sunglasses, stepped into her low heels, and walked to the garage. The engine purred to life, smooth and certain. As she backed down the drive, she glanced once in the rearview mirror. The house stood quiet, every window catching the morning sun. Willowmere's gardens were alive again, not with whispered vows or staged photo shoots, but with the low hum of conversation, the clink of champagne flutes, and the rustle of gowns in navy and gold moving through the late spring air. The hydrangeas glowed in the soft light strung overhead. A jazz quartet played near the fountain, their music drifting lazily across the lawn, mingling with the scent of roses and the faint salt of hors d'oeuvres being passed on silver trays. Tonight, every dollar raised would go to the Charlottesville Women's Shelter, and every cost, from the orchids draping the arch to the candle-lit centerpieces, had been covered quietly, entirely, by Marlene Whitaker. She stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Local philanthropists, small business owners, a handful of the shelter's staff, each pausing to thank her with a handshake or a warm squeeze of the hand. Beautiful evening, one woman said, adjusting the pearl clasp at her throat. It is, Marlene agreed. But beauty is better when it has purpose. By the time the sky had deepened to indigo, the crowd had gathered beneath the floral arch. It was the same one Felicity had once claimed for herself, now freed from monogrammed signage and promises never kept. Lucas stepped forward to adjust the microphone at the podium, then glanced to his great-aunt. You ready? Marlene smoothed the skirt of her dress and walked to the front. The murmurs quieted. The air was warm but not heavy, the kind of evening that made people linger outside longer than they planned. She rested her hands lightly on the podium. Legacy, she began, her voice carrying with the clarity of someone who'd been waiting to say this, isn't a label, it's a choice. It's not about what we inherit, it's about what we build, and who we choose to build it for. A beat of silence followed, then applause, not thunderous but steady, sincere. After she stepped down, Lucas caught her by the arch. Hold still, he said, lifting his phone. The camera clicked, capturing her framed by the blooms and soft light. He tapped the screen, typed a short caption, and posted it without ceremony. Still standing, Ellie found her near the champagne table. She raised her glass, the bubbles catching the glow of the string lights. "Best cancellation in estate history," she said with a grin. Marlene clinked her glass gently against Ellie's. "It's not the first, but I'll admit, it's the most satisfying." Miles away, in a modest rented apartment with bare walls and mismatched furniture, Felicity sat cross-legged on her couch. The glow of her phone screen lit her face in the darkened room. The live stream played without commentary, just the ambient sounds of the gala, laughter, music, the soft applause after Marlene's speech. Her eyes lingered on the arch, on the table settings, on the people who should have been her guests, but were now here for something that had nothing to do with her. The chat feed scrolled with cheerful comments and hearts. She didn't type anything. Back at Willowmere, Marlene strolled the edge of the lawn, letting the music and conversation flow around her. The night felt settled, the kind of peace that came not from absence of conflict, but from winning the right battles. She turned toward the buffet, only to feel a small tug at her sleeve. Colby stood there in a tiny navy blazer, his hands tucked behind his back. "Aunt Marlene?" "Yes, sweetheart." His eyes were curious, not accusing. "Do you think she's still mad at you?" Colby's eyes stayed on her, waiting for an answer to the question from the night before. "Maybe," Marlene said with a small smile. "But that's not really the point anymore." The boy tilted his head, puzzled but accepting. He wandered off toward the dessert table, leaving Marlene standing at the edge of the lawn as the last guests drifted away. The air was thick with the lingering scent of roses and candle wax, the grass underfoot damp from the evening dew. The next morning, she walked the gardens of Willowmere alone. Early sunlight spilled through the archways, brushing the stone with gold. The hydrangeas were heavy with bloom, their petals beaded with drops from the sprinkler system. Somewhere in the distance, a groundskeeper's shears clicked in a steady rhythm. Every path, every hedge was hers now, not just to own, but to protect. Willowmere was no longer a rentable backdrop for vanity. It had been placed under the Marlene Whitaker Foundation, a legally binding safeguard that ensured its grounds would only ever host causes worth standing for. She paused beneath the arch, running her fingers lightly along the cool wood of its frame. No sign of the scripted gold letters Felicity had once planned to hang there remained. On the west lawn, a young couple approached, early 20s, hand in hand, faces still carrying the dazed glow of fresh engagement. "Mrs. Whitaker?" the young woman asked shyly. "Yes, we just wanted to thank you," she said, squeezing her fiancé's hand. "We came last night with my sister. It was beautiful. We've been talking about it all morning." Her fiancé added, "It reminded us of why we want something small, meaningful, not just a production." Marlene studied them for a moment, then nodded. "Don't forget where you come from," she said softly. "It's the only way to know where you're going." They both smiled, and after another word of thanks, they moved on toward the garden paths, disappearing around a hedge. She walked on, the crunch of gravel under her heels, the only sound. The place felt different now, not a stage but a sanctuary. When her phone buzzed in her bag, she almost ignored it, but curiosity won. She slid it out, glanced at the screen, and saw the name she expected, but not the message. "Felicity Whitaker, payment received, $1,000 toward restitution." The number was small compared to the list Martin had given her, but it was something, a start, or perhaps just an empty gesture. Her thumb hovered over the notification. For a moment she imagined opening it, typing a short acknowledgement, letting this be the first tentative bridge. Instead, she swiped left and deleted it without opening. She stopped near the reflecting pool, looking out at her own reflection rippling in the water. The woman staring back wasn't the one Felicity had tried to erase. She wasn't even the one who'd fought to reclaim her place. She was someone who had built something new in the ashes, not for recognition, but for permanence. The breeze stirred the scent of wisteria from the nearby trellis. Somewhere beyond the hedge, the laughter of the young couple floated back to her. Felicity's aisle would have ended here, at the floral arch, with Derek waiting and the cameras clicking. But there was no aisle now, only open space, ready for whatever came next. Marlene turned away from the water, the gravel path crunching softly under her steps. She blocked me out of her wedding, she said to the quiet air, the words carrying more satisfaction than bitterness. I blocked her out of my legacy, and built something stronger where her aisle used to be.